I told the trillionaire Alpha King that the $5,000 caviar was simply too expensive. But he didn't argue or flinch. He simply looked at the terrified restaurant manager and bought the entire Michelin star building in cash. He locked the heavy gilded doors, trapped me inside with him, and gave the kitchen a single, earth-shattering command: cook the entire menu. Feed my mate. I've spent my whole life building an empire so I'd never have to rely on a man. But when he decides my fierce ambition is his biggest turn-on, surrendering suddenly becomes the ultimate power move.
Hey lovers, welcome back at Tiana's Collections. Just before we listen to today's story, I would love to take a quick second to connect with my fellow romance lovers. We're building a wonderful community, and we have listeners tuning in from all over the world. I'd love to know where you are listening from today. Drop your city or country flag in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love to know how far our park has grown. Now, grab a popcorn and get ready.
Chapter 1. Listen to me very carefully. I snapped into my headset, slamming my palm against the glass of my corner office. I don't care if your net worth rivals a small country. You do not reroute my global freight ships without my authorization. If those containers aren't docked in 20 minutes, I am dropping your account. I killed the call before the billionaire could sputter a reply. A savage thrill rushed through me. My logistics empire was mine. I bowed to no man's wallet. I spun around to grab my coffee, entirely unprepared for the towering, broad-shouldered mountain of a man who had silently bypassed 6 layers of corporate security to stand directly inside my office. "Who are you?" I demanded, crossing my arms to hide the sudden tremor in my hands. "How did you get past Brenda? She has a taser." The man didn't flinch. Too large for the minimalist aesthetics of my boardroom, he exuded absolute, unapologetic power in a bespoke suit that cost more than my first warehouse. He tilted his head, eyes flashing molten amber. Then, he inhaled. The oxygen vanished. A scent slammed into me: crushed cedar, ozone, and something intoxicatingly rich. The soul resonance, the cellular recognition of a fated mate. My knees threatened to buckle, a primal instinct screaming at me to submit. Instead, I grabbed a shipping manifest and shoved it against his chest. "I don't care what you smell like," I said, voice dripping with corporate ice. "If you don't have an appointment, leave. I run a global supply chain, not a dating service." A rumbling chuckle vibrated through his chest. He didn't glance at the manifest. He looked at me like I was the most fascinating creature he had ever encountered. "You just hung up on the Duke of the Eastern Seaboard," he noted, his gravelly purr sending a flush of heat to my core. He was being an idiot. "He is my highest-ranking lord," the man replied, stepping closer, trapping me against my desk. "And I am Alpha King Logan." I froze. The trillionaire apex predator of our species, the man who dismantled monopolies for fun. "Well," I swallowed, tilting my chin to fiercely meet his gaze. "Tell him to respect my transit schedules." Logan's eyes darkened with raw obsession. He didn't argue. Before my brain registered his movement, his massive hands gripped my waist. He effortlessly hoisted me over his broad shoulder like I weighed nothing. "Hey!" I shrieked, my fierce composure shattering as my power suit wrinkled. "Put me down. I have a quarterly review." "Cancel it," Logan rumbled, marching straight out of my office. "I just bought your scheduling firm and deleted your calendar. We are going to dinner." "I'll fire you," I yelled at my stunned employees as he carried me past their cubicles. "You can't fire your king, little wolf," he growled playfully. "Watch me," I hissed. "I pay for my own meals. I don't need your charity or a royal kidnapping." He pushed through my lobby's glass doors. An armored motorcade idled on the curb. "It isn't kidnapping if I plan to worship you," Logan stated. He lowered me to my feet, trapping me against the car door, lips brushing my ear. Pick the most expensive place in the city, Sophie. Let's see exactly how much it costs to. Chapter 2. Feed a woman who thinks she can outbid a king. I scoffed, smoothing down my wrinkled blazer as I slid onto the plush leather seats of his armored SUV. I don't outbid people, Logan. I optimize their spending. And I certainly don't let strange men, royal or not, dictate my dietary budget. I am not a strange man, he murmured, his massive frame taking up entirely too much space in the lavish cabin. The amber glow of his eyes was fixed squarely on my mouth. I am your fated mate, and as of today, your budget is infinity. Infinity is a mathematical concept, not a fiscal policy. I shot back, crossing my arms. Within minutes, the motorcade pulled up to L'Etoile d'Or, an establishment so ridiculously exclusive I'm pretty sure you had to pledge your firstborn just to get a reservation. I'd audited their parent company once. Their profit margins on truffles were downright criminal. The maitre d' practically wept with joy when Logan stepped through the gilded doors, bowing so low I thought he might crack his forehead on the marble floor. We were ushered immediately to a private velvet-draped balcony overlooking the glittering city skyline. I sat down, spine completely straight, preparing to firmly establish my boundaries. The waiter handed me a leather-bound menu. I opened it, scanning the elegant cursive. I frowned. "Excuse me, there are no prices on this menu." "It is the ladies' menu, madame," the waiter whispered reverently. "The Alpha King will handle the incidentals." "The hell he will," I snapped, tossing the menu onto the crisp white tablecloth. "Bring me the real one. I pay my own way. Always." Logan chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent an entirely inappropriate shiver straight down my spine. He nodded to the terrified waiter, who hastily swapped my menu for the standard version. I opened it, ready to order a sensible mid-tier chicken dish to prove my point. My eyes fell on the appetizers. I choked on my own breath. $5,000? I shrieked, my fierce corporate composure slipping entirely. For a spoonful of fish eggs? Absolutely not. This is extortion. The caviar is too expensive. Sophie. Logan sighed, looking incredibly amused as he leaned back in his chair. It's imported. It's a scam. I could buy 3 industrial forklifts for the price of this appetizer spread, I argued, tapping my manicured fingernail aggressively against the exorbitant numbers. We are leaving, or I am ordering tap water and a complimentary bread basket, so I refuse to participate in this financial irresponsibility. I moved to stand up, fully prepared to march out and hail a cab back to my spreadsheet. But Logan didn't argue. He didn't try to coax me or mansplain luxury dining. Instead, he simply raised 2 fingers in the air. The restaurant manager materialized instantly, sweating profusely. "How much for the restaurant?" Logan asked casually, not taking his eyes off me. The manager blinked. I beg your pardon, Your Majesty? You mean the bill?" "I mean the building, the staff, the brand," Logan clarified, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with an ancient, territorial power that made the silver cutlery rattle against the fine china. "Name your price, double it, wire it to my accountants." "Done, sire," the manager squeaked, practically vibrating out of his shoes. Excellent," Logan purred. He stood up, a towering monument of sheer dominance, and slammed his heavy hands down on our table. "Lock the doors. Nobody else comes in. Tell the kitchen to cook every single item on that menu." He leaned over the table, his face inches from mine, his scent of crushed cedar and ozone completely enveloping me as he delivered the ultimate command. "Feed my mate." My jaw dropped, my fierce independence suddenly short-circuiting as 80 highly trained chefs scrambled in the kitchen just for me. But as Logan reached across the table and slowly untied the silk ribbon of my blouse, I realized the food was only the appetizer, and I was officially on the menu. Chapter 3. My hands immediately shot up to my collar, swatting at his thick fingers as the silk ribbon of my blouse pooled against my collarbone. "I am not on the menu, Logan," I hissed, leaning back so fast my chair nearly tipped over. "And you cannot just buy a Michelin star restaurant because I wanted to save $4,900 on fish eggs. Do you have any idea what the overhead on a place like this is? The union contracts for the kitchen staff alone?" "Sophie," Logan interrupted, his voice a dark, velvety rumble that seemed to vibrate straight through the soles of my sensible corporate heels. He didn't move back. Instead, he pulled his heavy mahogany chair scraping across the marble floor until it was flush against mine. There was absolutely zero space between us. His massive thigh pressed against my knee, radiating a furnace of heat. "Stop auditing my spontaneous real estate purchases and look at the door." I dragged my gaze away from the hypnotic, molten amber of his eyes. A literal parade was marching through the velvet curtains. It wasn't just a waiter. It was an army. The executive chef, practically trembling with a mix of terror and profound artistic validation, led a procession of at least 12 staff members. They were pushing silver carts laden with covered cloches. The scent of black truffles, seared butter, and something sweet and caramelized completely overtook the room, battling with the intoxicating crushed cedar scent of my fated mate. "Your Majesty," the chef breathed, bowing so low his tall white hat nearly swept the floor. "The first wave, as commanded, everything." "Leave it. Dismissed," Logan commanded, not even glancing at the culinary masterpieces. His eyes were entirely locked on my face, studying the rapid pulse fluttering at my throat. The staff vanished like ghosts, leaving us utterly alone on the candlelit balcony overlooking the glittering city. Logan reached out, his massive hand dwarfing the delicate silver handle of the first cloche. He lifted it. A perfectly seared cut of a 5 Wagyu beef rested on a bed of gold leaf-infused puree. It looked like it cost more than my first car. I immediately reached for my fork, determined to maintain some semblance of dignified, independent control. "Fine. If you insist on this ridiculous display of financial dominance, I will eat. But I am paying you back for my half of the appraised property value of this restaurant. We can arrange a payment plan over the next." Logan smoothly intercepted my wrist. His grip was entirely gentle, but as immovable as a mountain. He took the silver fork from my trembling fingers, set it on the table, and picked up the delicate gold-handled serving knife. "You aren't paying for anything ever again, little wolf," he murmured, his eyes darkening with a possessive heat that made my breath hitch. "And you certainly aren't feeding yourself tonight." Before I could protest, he sliced a perfect, tender piece of the Wagyu, dipped it into the rich sauce, and brought it to my lips. "Open," he commanded softly. "Logan, I am a fully capable CEO of a global logistics firm," I argued, my voice betraying me by coming out as a breathless whisper. "I can feed myself." "I know you can," he replied, the corner of his mouth tipping into a devastating smirk. "You have fought for every single thing you have. You built an empire with your bare hands. You carry the weight of thousands of employees. But right now, in this room, you don't have to lift a single finger. Let me take care of you. Open." My fierce, independent brain screamed at me to refuse, to stand up and walk out. But the sheer, unrelenting devotion in his eyes completely short-circuited my defenses. With a soft, defeated sigh, I parted my lips. He fed me the exquisite cut of meat. The flavor exploded across my tongue, rich and impossibly decadent. But it was entirely secondary to the intense, burning focus of the Alpha King watching me swallow. He didn't take a single bite for himself. For the next hour, he methodically, reverently hand-fed me the most luxurious meal of my life. Truffle risotto, butter-poached lobster, spun sugar desserts that melted on the roof of my mouth. Every time I tried to bring up maritime shipping laws or quarterly profit margins to break the heavy, sensual tension, he would simply silence me with another bite of caviar or a sip of 50-year-old wine, his thumb gently swiping a stray drop of sauce from my lower lip. By the time the final cart was empty, I was entirely flushed, my heart hammering against my ribs, dangerously intoxicated not by the wine, but by the sheer scale of his pampering. I had never felt so overwhelmed and yet so terrifyingly safe. "See?" Logan whispered, leaning in until his lips brushed the shell of my ear. "Surrendering to me doesn't hurt at all." He stood up in one fluid motion, the sheer size of him blocking out the city lights. Before I could even reach for my purse, his arms swept under my knees and my back, lifting me tightly against his chest. "Put me down," I gasped, instinctively wrapping my arms around his thick neck as the room spun. "The car is right downstairs." "You are done walking for the evening," Logan rumbled, carrying me toward the private elevator. "Besides, you're going to need your energy. We have a lot to unpack." "Unpack? My apartment is fully furnished," I countered, trying to sound stern while thoroughly enjoying the solid warmth of his chest. "We aren't going to your apartment, Sophie," he stated casually as the elevator doors slid open. "Your lease has been bought out. Your empire is relocating. You are moving into the palace." "Put me down," I hissed, impounding my fist against the absolute granite of his shoulder as he carried me past the weeping, bowing restaurant staff and straight out the gilded front doors. Logan didn't even break his stride. He simply adjusted his grip, pulling me tighter against his chest as the cool night air hit us. The armored motorcade was idling on the curb, the imposing, tactical vehicles looking completely out of place against the romantic backdrop of the city's culinary district. "I am not moving into your palace," I argued, my corporate negotiation skills kicking into overdrive as he smoothly deposited me into the cavernous back seat of the lead SUV. I immediately scrambled to the far side of the plush leather bench, smoothing down my skirt. "I have a routine. I have a life. I have a very specific brand of imported coffee in my kitchen that I need to function at 5 in the morning. You cannot just hijack my entire existence because we share a metaphysical bond." Logan slid into the vehicle beside me, taking up entirely too much space. The heavy doors clicked shut, plunging us into the dim, intimate lighting of the cabin. "I already bought the coffee company," he replied flawlessly, pouring us 2 glasses of sparkling water from the built-in console. "3 pallets of your specific roast are currently being stocked in your private kitchen wing. And I am not hijacking your existence, Sophie. I am upgrading it." I crossed my arms, glaring at his impossibly handsome, perfectly calm profile. My heart was doing frantic gymnastics in my chest. This was exactly what I had always feared. A powerful man sweeping in, as buying up my autonomy, and locking me in a beautiful, diamond-encrusted cage to be a silent, decorative trophy. "I won't be a house pet, Logan," I warned him, my voice dropping its sarcastic edge, revealing the genuine, fierce vulnerability beneath. "I won't sit around in silk gowns planning garden parties while you run the world. If you think you can smother my ambition with luxury, you have the wrong mate." Logan slowly turned his head to look at me. The amusement vanished from his eyes, replaced by a deep, ancient reverence. He reached across the seat, his massive, warm hand gently cupping my cheek. His thumb stroked my jawline, sending a cascade of sparks through my nervous system. "I didn't choose a garden party socialite, Sophie," he murmured, his voice fiercely serious. "The Bond chose a warlord in a tailored blazer. And I don't want to smother your ambition. I want to build a throne for it." I swallowed hard, entirely disarmed by his words. The rest of the drive passed in a heavy, charged silence. When the motorcade finally passed through the towering, heavily fortified iron gates of the royal estate, I couldn't help but gasp. The palace wasn't just a home. It was a sprawling, modern architectural marvel of glass, steel, and ancient stone, entirely hidden within a massive private forest. Logan bypassed the grand entrance entirely. Instead, the driver navigated to a secluded, ultra-modern wing of the estate, stopping in front of a private, glass-walled pavilion. He didn't carry me this time. He stepped out and offered me his hand. I took it, stepping onto the pristine slate driveway. "Welcome home," he said quietly, leading me through the biometric glass doors. I braced myself. I expected a bedroom draped in velvet, a massive canopy bed, and a wardrobe full of sheer, impractical lingerie. I was ready to fight for my boundaries. Instead, the lights flickered on, illuminating a cavernous 2-story room. My jaw dropped. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a state-of-the-art command center. A massive, custom-built mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, flanked by 6 curved, high-definition monitors. A massive digital map of global shipping routes, my company's exact software, glowed against the far wall. To the right, a sleek, modern conference area with soundproof glass walls. To the left, a fully stocked espresso bar. "What is this?" I whispered, walking forward in a daze, trailing my fingers over the butter-soft leather of the executive chair. "Warrant your new headquarters," Logan said softly, leaning against the doorframe, watching me with intense satisfaction. While we were at dinner, I had my tech division hardwire direct, military-grade fiber optic lines to all 7 of your international shipping hubs. The servers are isolated and encrypted. You have more processing power in this room than most national defense agencies. I spun around, utterly shocked. You built me an office?" "I built you a sanctuary," he corrected, his amber eyes tracking my every movement. He pointed down the hall. "Your sleeping quarters are through there. The wardrobe is stocked with your exact measurements. And Sophie?" I looked at him, completely overwhelmed by the fact that he had looked past my gender, past the mate bond, and seen exactly what I valued most. My work, my independence. He stepped backward into the main hallway, leaving my heavy, soundproof office door wide open. "I will never lock you in," Logan promised, his voice echoing slightly in the massive space. He reached into his tailored jacket and tossed a heavy, matte black card onto the nearest glass table. "But I will challenge you. That card has no limit. Spend it tomorrow. Buy a fleet of cargo planes. Buy a small island. Spend it all." He flashed a dangerously wicked, predatory smile that made my knees genuinely weak. "Because if you don't spend it, little wolf, I am going to buy absolutely every single thing your eyes linger on." The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the cavernous, billionaire-tier command center. I stared at the matte black rectangle resting innocently on the glass table. It didn't even have a bank logo on it, just a solid, heavy sliver of infinite financial power, casually tossed aside like a spare key. I didn't touch it. I turned on my heel, marched into the adjoining suite, and fully expected to spend the night staring at the ceiling, fiercely analyzing my escape routes. I am a woman of logic, schedules, and absolute control. Fated mates or not, you do not simply uproot my life without a logistical counteroffensive. But the moment my head hit the impossibly soft, temperature-regulated pillows, my exhausted, adrenaline-fried system crashed. Surrounded by the lingering scent of crushed cedar and ozone, I slept deeper and safer than I had in a decade. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that felt entirely mine. My own tailored blazer and skirt had been impeccably dry-cleaned, pressed, and hung on a velvet hanger by an invisible staff. I dressed like I was going to war. I grabbed the black card between my index and middle finger like it was a live grenade, and marched out of my pavilion. Logan was waiting by the motorcade. He was leaning against the sleek black hood of the SUV, looking obnoxiously well-rested in a dark, custom-tailored suit that emphasized every terrifying inch of his broad shoulders. He was holding 2 steaming cups of coffee in a completely unregal, intensely domestic way. "You forgot your card," I announced, marching right up to his chest and slapping the plastic against his silk lapel. Logan didn't even blink. He caught the card before it fell, his massive fingers brushing against mine, sending a jolt of electricity straight up my arm that made my breath hitch. He smoothly handed me a cup of coffee. I took a suspicious sip. It was my exact, highly specific imported roast, brewed to the exact temperature I preferred. "I didn't forget anything, Sophie," he purred, his amber eyes glittering with dark amusement. "Good morning to you, too. Did the servers boot up to your liking?" "The servers are fine. The fiber optics are terrifyingly fast. But I am not your charity case," I said, gripping the coffee cup to ground myself. "I don't want your money. I don't need my life bankrolled." "It's not charity. It's tribute," Logan corrected smoothly, opening the heavy car door for me. "And since you refuse to use the card, my challenge stands. Get in. We are going for a drive, and I am going to buy absolutely every single thing your beautiful eyes linger on." "You're bluffing," I scoffed, sliding into the leather seat. "Even an Alpha King has a liquid asset limit." "Test me," he whispered, shutting the door. The drive into the city's high-end commercial district was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I sat completely rigid, my eyes glued to the plush floor mats, vehemently refusing to look out the tinted windows. Logan sat beside me, radiating heat and absolute smugness, his arm casually draped behind my seat. "We are passing a diamond district," he noted casually, his voice a low, teasing rumble. "Some very nice, flawless cuts in the window, a few matching sets that would look spectacular against your collarbone." "I don't care," I muttered, staring fiercely at my sensible heels. "A luxury auto dealership. I think that aggressive little sports car matches your eyes perfectly." "I prefer public transit. It's highly efficient and better for the environment." Logan chuckled, a sound that did wonderful, terrible things to my heart rate. The SUV rolled to a stop at a red light. I made the mistake of shifting my gaze upward for a fraction of a second. My eyes locked onto a quaint, high-end artisanal coffee shop on the corner. It was busy, efficient, and had a fantastic logistical flow of morning commuters. I watched it for exactly 3 seconds. Logan tapped the glass partition dividing us from the driver. "Buy that corner lot. Franchise the coffee brand globally. Put the parent holding company in Sophie's name." "Yes, sire," the driver replied instantly, tapping an earpiece. My jaw dropped. I spun to face him, my fierce composure shattering. "Are you insane?" I looked at it for 3 seconds. "You don't even know their quarterly earnings. You haven't looked at their overhead." "I don't care about their earnings." Logan leaned in, his voice dropping into a breathless, territorial growl that consumed all the oxygen in the cabin. "I care that it held my mate's attention. What else do you want to look at, Sophie?" "Fine," I breathed, my competitive corporate streak igniting into a blazing inferno. If he wanted a war of attrition, I was going to bankrupt him with the most unglamorous, violently practical purchases on the eastern seaboard. I reached past him and tapped the glass partition myself. "Driver, cancel the shopping district. Take us to Sector 4, the industrial shipping port." Logan raised a thick, dark eyebrow, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his incredibly handsome face. "Sector 4? Not exactly a romantic promenade for our first morning together." "You said you'd buy anything I looked at," I retorted, crossing my arms defensively and sinking back into the plush leather. I hope you have a highly diversified portfolio, Logan, because I'm about to give you a harsh lesson in heavy machinery overhead and unionized labor costs. 20 minutes later, the glittering city skyline was replaced by towering steel cranes, rusting cargo containers, and the deafening roar of freight logistics. The motorcade pulled up to a massive, sprawling commercial warehouse complex that was actively up for auction. It was gritty, loud, and smelled heavily of diesel fuel and salt water. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I rolled down the tinted window and leaned out, making a highly theatrical show of gazing longingly at a row of 20 heavy-duty commercial-grade forklifts lined up by the loading docks. Wow, I sighed dramatically, fluttering my eyelashes. Look at the hydraulic lifts on those machines. The turn radius must be absolutely incredible. I simply cannot look away from that brutalist, completely unaesthetic corrugated metal roofing. I pulled my head back in, shooting Logan a triumphant, challenging smirk. Let's see you put a diamond collar on that. Logan didn't laugh. He didn't cringe at the smell of exhaust filtering into his pristine luxury vehicle. Instead, he leaned over me, his broad chest pressing heavily against my shoulder as he looked out the window at the sprawling port. His amber eyes narrowed, calculating, sharp, and entirely serious. Deep water access, Logan murmured, and his voice rumbling right against my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. Direct railway integration on the south side. It bypasses the city's main traffic grid entirely. It's brilliant. If you route your European imports through here instead of the northern docks, you cut your cross-country transit time by 14%. My triumphant smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a sudden, breathless shock. He wasn't just patronizing me. He wasn't just playing a billionaire's game. He actually saw the strategic value. He saw my vision. He spoke my language. Logan pulled a sleek, encrypted phone from his suit jacket and hit a single button. Acquire the Sector 4 port. All of it. The warehouses, the machinery, the shipping contracts, the union pensions. Deed it to Sophie's logistics firm immediately. You cash transfer. He hung up and tossed the phone casually onto the seat. Then, he turned to me. The space between us in the back of the SUV suddenly felt suffocatingly small. The playful smugness was entirely gone from his expression, replaced by a dark, intense, possessive heat that completely devoured whatever air was left in my lungs. You think you're punishing me, little wolf? He whispered, lifting a large hand to trace the sharp line of my jaw, his thumb pressing gently but firmly into my racing pulse point. You think showing me your brilliant, ruthless business mind is going to push me away? I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding so violently against my ribs I was certain he could hear it. I had spent my entire adult life hiding my ambition from men who found it intimidating, bossy, or too masculine. And here was the most powerful predator in the world, literally intoxicated by my competence. It turns me on, Logan growled, his voice dropping into a register that bypassed my brain entirely and commanded my absolute physical submission. I don't want a mate who wants diamonds, Sophie. I want a mate who wants empires. So point at something else. Point at the whole damn city. Let me give it to you. The absolute last thread of my fierce resistance snapped. I didn't want to fight him anymore. I grabbed the lapels of his custom suit and hauled him down to me. Logan let out a raw, territorial groan as our lips crashed together. It wasn't a sweet, gentle kiss. It was a spectacular collision of power. His massive hands immediately swept around my waist, lifting me effortlessly into his lap right there in the back of the armored car. I tangled my fingers in his dark hair, kissing him back with every ounce of frustration, desire, and overwhelming shock that had been building inside me since he first walked into my office. His mouth was hot, demanding, and incredibly skilled, his tongue sweeping past my lips to claim absolute ownership. He tasted like expensive espresso and sheer, undeniable power. I arched against his hard chest, my sensible corporate skirt riding dangerously high up my thighs as his heavy hands mapped the curves of my hips with reverent, burning intensity. Mine. He breathed heavily against my mouth, his sharp fangs grazing my lower lip, sending a jolt of pure fire straight to my core. Say it, Sophie. Tell me whose empire this is. Yours, I gasped, entirely losing my mind as his mouth trailed down my jaw, his hot breath dancing over the highly sensitive skin of my neck. Wrong, Logan rasped, his teeth grazing right over my pulse point, lingering exactly where a claiming mark would go. Try again. A full-body shiver wrecked my posture. I was sitting sideways in the lap of the most dangerous man on the planet, in the back of a moving vehicle, and my brain had completely short-circuited. But the fierce, competitive fire that had built my logistics empire wasn't dead. It was just incredibly, breathlessly aroused. I grabbed the lapels of his custom three-piece suit, my knuckles turning white, and yanked him back up so his molten amber eyes were level with mine. Mine, I commanded, my voice shaking but absolutely certain. The shipping port is mine, the coffee company is mine, and you are mine. Logan let out a sound that I could only describe as pure religious reverence. Yes, he breathed, a devastating smile breaking across his handsome face. Every breath I take, all of it, yours. He hit the intercom button with the back of his hand. Palace, now. The armored SUV took the corners so fast the tires squealed, but I barely registered the motion. Logan pulled me flush against his chest, burying his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling my scent like he was a starving man, and I was his first meal in a decade. His massive hands spanned my back, protective, heavy, and completely intoxicating. By the time the motorcade slammed to a halt outside my glass-walled pavilion, my sensible corporate updo was entirely destroyed. Logan didn't wait for the driver. He kicked his own door open, Moss stepped out with me still securely locked in his arms, and strode through the biometric doors. The moment the heavy glass sealed behind us, the atmosphere shifted from frantic urgency to a thick, suffocating heat. Put me down, I whispered, my voice incredibly husky. For once, Logan obeyed. He let my sensible heels touch the floor of my new high-tech office, but he didn't step back. I looked up at him, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had spent my entire life maintaining absolute control in every situation. I negotiated hostile takeovers for fun. But looking at the sheer, overwhelming size and devotion of the Alpha King, I realized I didn't want to manage this. I wanted to surrender to it. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly, and grasped the knot of his dark silk tie. I pulled it loose. Logan's eyes flared, his breath hitching as he stood perfectly still, allowing me absolute dominion over his incredibly expensive wardrobe. I undid his vest, discarding it onto the pristine white leather sofa. I unbuttoned his crisp shirt, exposing a chest of solid, scarred granite. You are so used to fighting for every inch, Sophie, Logan murmured, his voice a low vibration that traveled straight through my fingertips as they rested against his hot skin. You don't have to fight me. I am already conquered. To prove his point, the trillionaire apex predator of our species did the unthinkable. He dropped to his knees. Right there, in the middle of my gleaming new command center, Logan knelt before me. The height difference vanished, leaving his face perfectly aligned with my waist. He looked up at me, his expression entirely stripped of his usual smug dominance, leaving only raw, unconditional worship. He reached out, his massive hands gripping my hips, his thumbs smoothing over the fabric of my skirt. He pressed an open-mouthed kiss to my stomach, right through the silk of my blouse. The sheer, terrifying vulnerability of the gesture shattered the last stubborn wall I had been holding on to. I tangled my hands in his thick, dark hair, letting out a fractured sigh as he began a meticulous, utterly devastating campaign of physical worship. He didn't rush. He mapped every inch of me with a reverence that made me feel less like a corporate CEO and more like a reigning deity. He kissed, tasted, and praised me until my legs literally gave out, forcing him to catch me and carry me the rest of the way to the sprawling, like silk-draped bed in the adjoining suite. The ensuing hours were a masterclass in giving up control. He dismantled my fierce independence entirely with blinding pleasure, anticipating my needs before I even voiced them, proving that surrendering to his care didn't diminish my fire. It fed it. When I finally collapsed against his chest, entirely spent, my skin glowing and my mind blissfully blank, Logan pulled the thick duvet over my shoulders. He pressed a tender, lingering kiss to my damp forehead, his amber eyes completely lucid and terrifyingly energized. "Rest, my beautiful warlord," Logan whispered into the quiet suite, his heavy hand lazily tracing circles on my bare spine. "Because tomorrow we are throwing out your entire suitcase." I blinked, my exhaustion briefly lifting. My suitcase is full of highly practical business attire." "I know," he smirked, a predatory gleam returning to his gaze. "Which is why I had my tailors construct a closet actually worthy of your ruthlessness. And tomorrow, I am going to dress you myself." I woke up the next morning to the smell of my absurdly specific, ridiculously expensive imported coffee. I stretched, groaning softly as a chorus of entirely new muscles made themselves known. I rolled over in the massive, cloud-like bed. Logan was already awake, fully dressed in a sharp charcoal suit minus the jacket, his sleeves rolled up to expose his corded forearms. He was sitting in a plush armchair near the window, a steaming mug in one hand, simply watching me sleep with the terrifying focus of a guardian gargoyle. "You're staring," I croaked, pulling the silk sheet up to my chin. "I am memorizing my best investment," Logan replied smoothly, setting the coffee down on a bedside table. He stood up and walked toward the bed, offering his hand. "Good morning, Sophie. I believe I promised you a wardrobe fitting." I eyed his hand suspiciously. I am a woman who thrives on uniformity. My closet back at my apartment consisted of 15 identical black blazers, 12 pencil skirts in varying shades of charcoal, and a collection of sensible nude heels. It was efficient. It required zero decision fatigue. If you have filled a room with pink tulle, sheer negligées, and diamond-encrusted tiaras, I am filing for an immediate annulment, I warned him, ignoring his hand and rolling out of bed, wrapping the sheet around myself like a makeshift toga. Logan let out a booming laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. "Pink tulle. My fierce, terrifying mate thinks I want to dress her like a pastry." He gestured toward a set of towering double doors made of frosted glass on the far side of the suite. "See for yourself." I padded across the heated hardwood floors, my heart beating with a strange mix of apprehension and curiosity. I pushed the double doors open. The closet was the size of my previous company's entire HR department. It was a masterpiece of modern design, featuring glowing backlit shelves, rich mahogany accents, and endless racks of clothing. I stopped dead in my tracks. There wasn't a single ruffle in sight. Instead, hanging in perfect, color-coordinated precision, was an arsenal of the most lethal, high-fashion powerwear I had ever laid eyes on. There were custom-tailored blazers with sharp, geometric shoulders crafted from midnight blue silk. There were high-waisted trousers in oxblood leather. There were sheath dresses that looked like they had been weaponized, tailored to hug a woman's curves while projecting absolute, terrifying authority. And the shoes. A massive wall of stilettos, sleek ankle boots, and aggressive pumps with red soles and razor-thin heels. I walked over to a rack, completely speechless, and ran my fingers over a blazer made of crushed velvet so dark it seemed to absorb the light. It was breathtaking. It was exactly my style, elevated to a billionaire, aristocratic tier. You didn't buy me ball gowns," I whispered, turning to look at Logan, who had silently followed me into the massive space. "You are a CEO. You negotiate hostile takeovers and control international supply chains," Logan stated, stepping closer, his amber eyes dark with pride. "Why would I dress you like a debutante when you are a conqueror? A king doesn't put his queen in ruffles, Sophie. He puts her in armor." My breath hitched. He saw me. He actually, truly saw me. He wasn't trying to soften my edges or mold me into a traditional Luna. He wanted to sharpen my blades. "Now," Logan murmured, his voice dropping into that heavy, commanding octave that made my pulse erratic. "Drop the sheet." I hesitated for only a fraction of a second before letting the silk pool at my feet. What followed was the most intensely intimate, agonizingly slow process of my life. Logan didn't just tell me what to wear. He dressed me. He selected a pair of sheer, high-end stockings, kneeling on the plush carpet to slowly roll them up my calves and thighs, his large hands smoothing over my skin with burning reverence. He handed me a delicate lace bralette, completely practical but devastatingly expensive, and fastened it for me. He chose a high-collared emerald green silk blouse and a flawlessly tailored black pencil skirt that hugged my hips perfectly. He buttoned every single button of the blouse himself, his knuckles grazing my collarbone, his eyes entirely focused on the task like it was a sacred ritual. Finally, he slipped a pair of lethal, 5-inch black stilettos onto my feet. I stepped in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror. The woman looking back at me was terrifying. She was fierce, expensive, and radiated absolute, unbothered power. I looked like a woman who owned the world. Logan stepped up behind me, with his massive frame towering over my reflection. He rested his hands heavily on my sharp, tailored shoulders, his eyes locking with mine in the glass. "Perfect," he declared softly. "You look ready to make grown men cry." "Good," I smirked, adjusting my emerald cuffs. "Because I have a board meeting at noon." "Cancel it," Logan ordered, leaning down to press a kiss to the curve of my neck. "Because the royal court has been waiting in the grand hall for 2 hours. It's time to introduce the pack to their new absolute nightmare." "A nightmare." "Perfect," I breathed, rolling my shoulders back as the emerald silk of my custom blouse slid flawlessly against my skin. "Let's go traumatize some aristocrats." The walk through the sprawling palace corridors was a blur of vaulted ceilings, priceless tapestries, and heavily armed royal guards who snapped to immediate attention as we passed. I didn't look at them. I was too busy calculating my angles, my mind shifting seamlessly into hostile takeover mode. I had managed enough cutthroat corporate boardrooms to know exactly how this dynamic usually played out. The sudden, unannounced mate is paraded in front of a deeply entrenched, hostile elite. There would be whispers behind crystal champagne flutes. There would be a flawlessly beautiful, incredibly petty duchess who thought she deserved my position. I was mentally drafting 3 different verbal severance packages for anyone who dared to look at me with anything less than absolute submission. My 5-inch stilettos clicked against the polished marble like a metronome counting down to an execution. Logan didn't offer me his arm. In a terrifying display of respect, he walked exactly half a step behind me, a massive, silent shadow of lethal protection, letting me lead our procession to the towering mahogany doors of the grand hall. "Open them," Logan commanded the 2 guards flanking the entrance, his voice a low vibration that rattled the brass fixtures. I squared my shoulders, raised my chin, and prepared for war. The heavy doors swung outward. I stepped into a room easily the size of a football field, dripping in gold leaf and illuminated by 3 massive crystal chandeliers. Hundreds of the wealthiest, most powerful shifters on the continent were gathered inside, draped in haute couture and ancient jewels. I braced for the sneers. I waited for the whispers. Instead, absolute, deafening silence fell over the room. Before I could even sweep my gaze over the crowd to identify the weakest link, a unified rustle of heavy silk and tailored wool echoed through the hall. As one synchronized entity, the entire royal court dropped to their knees. There were no whispers. There were no challenging glares. Hundreds of heads bowed so deeply their chins touched their chests. The sheer, overwhelming wave of unconditional submission slammed into me, entirely short-circuiting my defensive strategies. "Rise." Logan's voice boomed from just over my shoulder, carrying the weight of ancient, unquestionable authority. The court stood in unison. I scanned the front row, my eyes landing on a stunning, severe-looking woman dripping in diamonds who absolutely radiated jealous rival energy. I narrowed my eyes, waiting for the micro-expression of disdain, and the woman stepped forward, her eyes entirely devoid of malice. She dipped into a flawless curtsy. "My queen," she said, her voice trembling slightly with profound respect. "I am Lady Vivian of the Northern Holdings. We have studied your logistics integration in the European markets. Your ruthlessness in streamlining the supply chain is nothing short of legendary. We are deeply honored to be led by an apex predator of your caliber." I blinked, my fierce corporate armor suddenly feeling entirely unnecessary. I looked over my shoulder at Logan. He was watching me, an unapologetically smug, devastatingly proud smirk playing on his lips. He hadn't just brought me into his world. He had completely sanitized it of toxicity. He had preemptively crushed any potential drama, ensuring that his court didn't view me as a threat to be neutralized, but as a masterclass in modern warfare to be worshipped. The realization hit me so hard my breath actually hitched. I didn't have to fight for my place here. My king had already built my throne and ordered the world to kneel. A sudden, overwhelming wave of exhaustion washed over me, the physical crash of a woman who had spent 30 years braced for a fight, suddenly realizing the war was over. Logan's smile vanished instantly. His fated mate instincts registered the microscopic drop in my adrenaline. In a flash of movement, his heavy arm wrapped tightly around my waist, anchoring me to his solid side. "We are leaving," Logan announced to the stunned court, his voice leaving absolutely zero room for negotiation. "The Queen's schedule is entirely booked for the remainder of the week. Do not contact us." Before I could even process the abrupt change in protocol, he was marching me right back out the mahogany doors, his grip on my waist a lifeline of blazing heat. "Leaving?" I hissed, my heels struggling to keep up with his massive strides as we bypassed the corridors entirely and headed toward a private exit. "I just established dominance. I was about to ask Lady Vivian about her Q3 portfolio diversification." "Your dominance is absolute, little wolf," Logan rumbled, pushing open a set of glass doors to reveal a sleek black helicopter idling on the manicured lawn. "But your cortisol levels are entirely too high. It's time for a forced system reboot, and I know exactly how to make you melt." "I do not need a system reboot, Logan. I need an Excel spreadsheet," I argued over the roar of the helicopter blades. He's stubbornly refusing to look out the window as the sprawling palace estate shrank beneath us. Logan simply adjusted the noise-canceling headset over my ears, his large hands lingering to stroke the line of my jaw. "You are running on fumes and sheer stubbornness, Sophie. You've carried the weight of a global empire on those sharp shoulders for years. For the next 48 hours, the only thing you are going to carry is a glass of champagne." I crossed my arms, fully prepared to maintain my rigid, defensive posture. But 40 minutes later, the helicopter descended into a secluded, breathtaking valley completely hidden by towering, snow-capped mountains. A sprawling, ultra-modern luxury hot springs resort was built directly into the cliffside, glass walls overlooking steaming, mineral-rich pools. It was the definition of billionaire tranquility, and it was completely, entirely empty. "Where are the other guests?" I asked suspiciously as Logan lifted me out of the helicopter, completely ignoring the perfectly good steps. "There are none," he replied casually, carrying me past the frantic, bowing concierge and straight toward the most exclusive private sanctuary in the resort. "I rented the valley. The airspace is restricted. The staff has been paid triple their annual salary to completely disappear until I ring a bell." He kicked open the heavy teak doors of our private villa. The air inside was thick, warm, and scented with eucalyptus and crushed cedar. A massive, steaming plunge pool carved from dark stone dominated the center of the room, surrounded by plush massage tables and flickering candles. Logan set me down gently on the heated slate floor. "Take off the armor, Sophie." I swallowed hard, the sheer intimacy of the empty, steaming room making my pulse race faster than any boardroom negotiation ever had. My fingers trembled slightly as I unbuttoned the emerald silk blouse he had so reverently fastened just hours ago. I stepped out of the lethal skirt and the vicious stilettos, stripping down to nothing. I didn't try to hide myself. I stood in the center of the room, entirely exposed, waiting for his move. Logan's eyes darkened to a deep, molten amber. He shed his own suit in a matter of seconds, his massive, heavily muscled frame a monument of raw power in the dim light. But instead of pulling me into the water, he gently grasped my shoulders and guided me toward the plush, heated massage table. "Lie down," he murmured. I obeyed, resting my face in the padded cradle. I expected him to call for a masseuse. Instead, I heard the soft clink of a glass bottle. A moment later, a pool of hot, heavily scented oil was poured directly onto my spine. I gasped as Logan's massive, impossibly warm hands pressed into my lower back. He didn't just rub my shoulders. He systematically dismantled every single knot of tension I had accumulated over a decade of corporate warfare. His thumbs pressed deep into the muscles of my shoulder blades, his powerful grip entirely precise and devastatingly gentle. "You hold everything right here," Logan rumbled, his hot breath brushing against my ear as he leaned over me, his broad chest grazing my back. "Every delayed shipment, every hostile board member, every time you had to prove you were twice as smart as the men in the room. Let it go, little wolf. I've got it now." His thumbs hit a particularly tight knot near my neck, applying the exact perfect amount of agonizingly good pressure. A heavy, fractured sigh ripped from my throat. My fierce independence, my rigid control, my relentless need to pay my own way. It all dissolved into the eucalyptus-scented steam. I melted into the table, completely and utterly pliant beneath his hands. "I love this," I whispered into the silence of the room, the confession feeling entirely foreign on my tongue. "I love being pampered by you." Logan's hand stilled immediately. He leaned down, pressing a blazing, open-mouthed kiss to the center of my spine, the absolute devotion in his touch making my heart physically ache. "Say it again," he commanded softly, his voice thick with raw emotion. Before I could repeat the words, the jarring, highly obnoxious sound of a customized ringtone echoed from my discarded blazer across the room. It was my emergency line, the line that only rang if my global logistics network was actively collapsing. My eyes flew open, the spell instantly broken. "My phone, Logan, my servers." I tried to push myself up, but Logan's heavy hands effortlessly pinned my shoulders flush against the table. He didn't look concerned. In fact, he looked entirely, terrifyingly amused. "Don't worry about the phone, Sophie," Logan purred, leaning down to nip playfully at the sensitive skin right below my ear, sending a shocking jolt of electricity straight to my core. I told your board of directors you were unavailable. They are just calling to inform you that your rival company was mysteriously liquidated an hour ago, and all their assets were aggressively transferred to your name. I froze, my mind scrambling to process the sheer scale of the corporate violence he had just committed in my honor. Now, Logan growled, his hand sliding slowly, agonizingly down my hips as the emergency line continued to ring in the background. Unless you want me to buy their naval fleet next, I suggest you stop thinking about your empire and start focusing on exactly what I'm about to do to you. The phone stopped ringing. I don't know if the battery died or if the caller simply gave up, because every single ounce of my cognitive function was being systematically dismantled by the Alpha King. He didn't just make me forget about my corporate empire. He replaced it entirely with the blazing, all-consuming reality of his touch. By the time we finally emerged from the eucalyptus-scented sanctuary of the hot springs 2 days later, my fierce, rigid armor was utterly decimated, replaced by a terrifyingly addictive sense of absolute security. But reality always calls back. Specifically, the reality of absorbing a massive rival corporation overnight. 72 hours later, I was back in my glass-walled palace command center, aggressively tapping a gold-plated pen against the mahogany desk. My 6 high-definition monitors were flooded with supply chain schematics, union contracts, and international shipping ledgers. Integrating an entire liquidated fleet into my existing network was a logistical nightmare, and I was absolutely, fiercely thriving in it. I pushed my sensible, albeit incredibly expensive, reading glasses up the bridge of my nose, while cross-referencing a European transit manifest. I didn't even hear the biometric doors slide open. You have been staring at that exact spreadsheet for 4 hours without blinking. A dark, velvety voice rumbled through the cavernous office. I didn't look up from the monitor. I am recalibrating the oceanic freight routes for the newly acquired Atlantic sector. Your little romantic gesture of liquidating my rival resulted in roughly 8,000 tons of misplaced cargo. I have to reroute the entire northern fleet before the market opens in Tokyo. Logan strolled into my line of sight, looking devastatingly handsome in a tailored charcoal 3-piece suit. He bypassed the plush leather visitor chairs entirely, walking right around my desk to invade my personal space, and the scent of crushed cedar and ozone immediately drowned out the smell of my imported coffee. I bought you an empire, Sophie, he murmured, bracing his massive hands on the armrests of my executive chair, effectively trapping me. I didn't buy you a second job. It's not a job, Logan. It's a conquest, I shot back, though my fierce tone was significantly undermined by the way my breath hitched when his thumb brushed the sensitive skin at the nape of my neck. But conquests require administrative oversight. No, Logan corrected smoothly, leaning down until his lips hovered a millimeter from mine. They require a queen. Queens dictate the vision. They do not do data entry. He straightened up and snapped his fingers. The sound echoed sharply. Instantly, the glass doors of my office slid open again. A team of 6 terrifyingly efficient-looking individuals marched into the room. They were dressed in impeccable, slate-gray suits, holding glowing tablets, and projecting an aura of absolute, ruthless competence. "What is this?" I demanded, my hands instinctively hovering over my keyboard to protect my proprietary data. "This is your new elite executive strike team," Logan announced, gesturing to the highly coordinated group. "I poached them from the top 3 Fortune 500 companies in the world. They are fluent in 14 languages, certified in international maritime law, and process data faster than a supercomputer. They aren't here to run your company, little wolf. They are here to execute your exact orders so you don't have to look at another spreadsheet." The lead assistant, a sharp-eyed woman with a sleek silver bob, stepped forward and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, we have already drafted the Tokyo routing protocols based on your predictive models. We simply need your signature to authorize the fleet. My jaw literally dropped. I looked from the highly trained corporate mercenaries to the Alpha King. He had done it again. He hadn't told me to stop working. He hadn't diminished my ambition. He had simply funded an army to make my life effortless. Leave the tablets on the conference table, Logan ordered the team without taking his eyes off me. And evacuate the wing. The Queen requires a private consultation. The team vanished with military precision. The doors sealed shut, locking down the soundproof glass. Before I could even process the sheer magnitude of the billionaire-tier delegation he had just gifted me, Logan's hands gripped my waist. With one effortless, fluid motion, he lifted me entirely out of the leather chair and deposited me right onto the center of my immaculate mahogany desk. My spreadsheets scattered, laptops pushed aside to make room for his imposing, heavily muscled frame. "Logan," I gasped, my hands instantly flying to his broad shoulders as he stepped between my thighs, the fabric of my custom oxblood pencil skirt riding up dangerously high. "The Tokyo market is handled," he growled, his golden eyes blazing with a territorial heat that completely melted my remaining corporate resistance. He reached up, slowly pulling my reading glasses from my face and tossing them onto a discarded transit ledger. "You are the visionary, Sophie. Your time is entirely too valuable to spend on anything other than the absolute peak of luxury. And right now, then I require your undivided executive attention." His mouth crashed down on mine, hot, demanding, and utterly consuming. The cool, polished wood of the desk bit into my back as he leaned over me, his massive chest pressing me down into the mahogany. It was a flawless juxtaposition. The nerve center of my professional power instantly transformed into an altar of absolute physical worship. My fingers tangled desperately in his dark hair, pulling him closer, my ambition seamlessly shifting into pure, unadulterated passion. He swallowed my fractured sigh, his hands mapping the curves of my hips with agonizing reverence, leaving a trail of liquid fire wherever he touched. The tension of the last 3 days evaporated, replaced by the dizzying, intoxicating reality of a king who lived only to serve me. "We need to stop," Logan breathed heavily against my collarbone several breathless, mind-altering minutes later, his voice a ragged vibration of strained restraint. He pressed one last, lingering kiss to my pulse point before reluctantly pulling back, his amber eyes completely dilated. "Because if I don't get you off this desk right now, we are going to miss the royal gala entirely. And I have spent all week waiting to show the global aristocracy exactly who holds my leash." The royal gala of the high equinox was not merely a party. It was a devastating display of wealth, power, and ancient shifter politics. As Logan and I stepped out of the armored motorcade and onto the sprawling, velvet-draped steps of the Winter Palace, the sheer scale of the event nearly broke my composure. Flashbulbs from elite pack photographers strobed like lightning. The air was thick with the scent of 1,000 exotic perfumes, rich champagne, and the underlying metallic hum of predator energy. But I was not the woman I had been a week ago. I didn't cower. I didn't calculate exit routes. I stepped into the blinding light wearing a custom-tailored, backless midnight blue gown that flowed like liquid sapphire, a slit running daringly high up my thigh. Around my throat rested a collar of flawless, emerald-cut diamonds that Logan had personally fastened, his heavy hands lingering on my skin just long enough to send a claiming shiver down my spine. He walked beside me, a towering monument of lethal grace in a midnight tuxedo, projecting an aura of absolute, terrifying dominance. But his hand rested firmly, as protectively at the small of my back, anchoring me to his blazing warmth. The massive mahogany doors swung open, and the grand ballroom fell into an immediate, reverent hush. Hundreds of the most powerful alphas and elite socialites turned to stare. I kept my chin tipped up, my face locked into the fierce, unreadable mask I usually reserved for hostile board negotiations. We moved through the crowd like royalty parting the sea. There were bows, deep curtsies, and murmurs of absolute awe. For the first hour, it was flawless. Logan introduced me not as his mate, but as his queen, his equal, his brilliant tactician. He watched me with such unrelenting public devotion that I felt a flush of pure power rising in my cheeks. Then, we reached the champagne fountain. Logan stepped away for a fraction of a second to retrieve 2 crystal flutes, and in that microscopic window of opportunity, a woman materialized from the crowd. She was draped in sheer, sparkling gold, radiating the kind of old-money aristocratic entitlement that I absolutely loathed. "Your Majesty," she purred, bypassing me entirely and stepping directly into Logan's personal space as he turned back with the drinks. She placed a highly manicured, heavily ringed hand gently on his tuxedo sleeve. "It has been an absolute age. My father, the Duke of the Western Steppes, sends his warmest regards. We were so hoping to discuss the new territorial borderlines with you tonight. In private, of course." I stiffened. Every alarm bell in my head screamed. In any other setting, in any other relationship, this was the exact moment the toxic drama would ignite. This was the jealousy test. The calculated move to make the new woman feel small, temporary, and inadequate. The noble didn't even glance at me. She was intentionally freezing me out of the conversation, treating me like a decorative accessory while she appealed to his power. I braced myself, ready to deploy a lethal corporate verbal takedown to defend my territory. I didn't have to. Logan didn't politely step back. He didn't offer a diplomatic smile. He completely froze. His amber eyes, which had been warm and playful all evening, turned to chips of absolute, terrifying ice. He looked down at the woman's hand on his arm as if a toxic insect had just landed on his custom tailoring. Without a single word, Logan physically turned his entire massive body, completely presenting his broad back to the stunned noblewoman. He completely and utterly dismissed her existence. He stepped flush against me, his broad shoulders blocking out the entire ballroom, creating a private, impenetrable wall of safety. He handed me my champagne flute, his eyes immediately returning to their molten, worshipful warmth. "Your diamond choker is slightly off-center, my beautiful queen," Logan murmured, his voice carrying perfectly over the sudden, suffocating silence of the surrounding crowd. He reached up with his free hand, his large, warm fingers gently brushing against my collarbone. He meticulously adjusted the flawless gems, his touch so fiercely devoted, so profoundly attentive, that the entire ballroom seemed to hold its collective breath. He wasn't just fixing my jewelry. He was making a highly public, unapologetic declaration. There was no other woman in the room. There was no other entity in the universe. And there was only me. A wave of pure, unadulterated possessiveness surged through my veins. The lingering corporate insecurity, the fear that I would have to constantly fight for my place beside a king, vanished entirely. I didn't wait for him to finish adjusting the clasp. I reached up, my hand gripping the lapel of his tuxedo, and I pulled him down. I kissed him, right there, in front of the entire glittering aristocracy. It wasn't a sweet, polite peck. It was a fierce, blazing claim of absolute ownership. I poured every ounce of my fire, my authority, and my overwhelming love into the kiss. Logan let out a low, rumbling growl of pure triumph, his arm immediately wrapping around my waist to pull me flush against his hard chest, lifting me slightly off my stilettos as he returned the kiss with earth-shattering intensity. When I finally broke the kiss, gasping softly, the ballroom was absolutely silent, save for the faint gasp of the utterly humiliated, entirely forgotten noblewoman behind him. "Mine," I whispered fiercely, my lips still brushing his. Logan smiled, a devastating, predatory curve of his mouth that made my knees genuinely weak. "Always," he promised, his thumb grazing my cheek. "And if you thought my devotion tonight was absolute, little wolf, just wait until you see the continent I bought you for tomorrow." "A continent?" I echoed, the word practically choking me as the glittering expanse of the grand ballroom spun slightly around us. I gripped the lapels of his tuxedo, my fiercely calibrated, highly logical brain entirely short-circuiting. "Logan, you cannot casually purchase a landmass. There are sovereign treaties. There are global zoning laws. There is the United Nations." "The United Nations works for me, Sophie," Logan murmured, his golden eyes dancing with dark, predatory amusement. He pressed a kiss to the crown of my head, completely ignoring the stunned, absolute silence of the surrounding aristocracy. "And I didn't purchase a standard landmass. I purchased a solution. But that is a conversation for tomorrow. Tonight, you are my queen, and I am entirely focused on exactly how this midnight blue silk looks against your skin." He was true to his word. The rest of the gala was a masterclass in absolute public worship. But the true shock arrived 12 hours later. I was standing in the cabin of a supersonic military-grade private jet, gripping the back of a plush leather captain's chair. We were 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, and I was wearing one of my new lethal oxblood power suits, completely prepared for a hostile corporate takeover. Instead, Logan stood behind me, his massive chest a solid wall of heat against my back as he gestured out the reinforced window. "Look down, little wolf," he commanded softly. I leaned forward. Below us, breaking the endless expanse of deep blue ocean, was a sprawling, massive archipelago. But it wasn't a pristine, untouched jungle waiting to be commercialized. It was a fully operational, high-tech, aggressively modernized global shipping utopia. "The Vanguard Archipelago," Logan rumbled, his breath warm against my neck. "It sits perfectly at the intersection of the 4 major international maritime trade routes. It bypasses the Panama Canal restrictions entirely. It has deep-water trenches capable of holding dreadnought-class cargo ships, and an autonomous, climate-controlled warehousing sector the size of Manhattan." My jaw unhinged. I pressed my hands against the glass, my eyes tracking the flawless, mathematical precision of the docking bays and the gleaming automated freight trains moving like silver ribbons across the islands. It was the white whale of the logistics industry. It was a myth. "The Vanguard is sovereign territory," I breathed, my voice trembling with sheer, unadulterated awe. "It's owned by a reclusive consortium. They refuse to sell. I tried to lease a single pier 3 years ago, and they laughed me out of the boardroom." "They aren't laughing anymore," Logan stated smoothly. He reached into the interior pocket of his tailored suit jacket and withdrew a heavy, matte black titanium cylinder. He unscrewed the top and slid out a thick roll of archaic, watermarked parchment. He unrolled it against the mahogany table of the jet's cabin. It was a sovereign deed of ownership, not a lease, not a corporate partnership. Absolute, uncontested ownership of the entire global choke point. I scanned the bottom of the document, expecting to see the royal seal of the Alpha King, expecting to see his holding company, expecting to see his name. Instead, stamped in brilliant, aggressive red ink was a single entity: Sophie Global Holdings, sole proprietor. "You put it in my name," I whispered, the words tearing out of my throat. I spun around to face him, my fiercely constructed corporate armor fracturing into a million pieces. "Logan, this is absolute global leverage. Whoever controls this archipelago controls the world's supply chain. You didn't just buy me a business. You handed me a monopoly." "I handed you a canvas," Logan corrected, stepping closer until there was no air left between us. His massive hands came up to frame my face, his thumbs gently wiping away a stray tear I hadn't even realized had fallen. You are the most brilliant tactician I have ever met. I wanted to give you a sandbox big enough for your ambition. It's yours, Sophie. No board of directors. No royal oversight. Just you. I stared up at the most dangerous, powerful man on the planet, entirely overwhelmed by the sheer, staggering weight of his unconditional support. He hadn't bought this to trap me. He had bought it to set me completely, terrifyingly free. My breath hitched in my chest. The very last, a deeply buried wall around my fiercely guarded heart completely disintegrated. Tell the pilot to turn the jet around, I choked out, my hands flying up to grip his broad shoulders with desperate, bruising force. Logan's brow furrowed slightly in concern. Sophie, do you not want to land and inspect the automated docking? I don't care about the docks, I interrupted, my voice cracking, a tear finally spilling over my lashes. I yanked him down by his silk tie. Take me home, Logan, right now. Take me back to our bedroom, because I am entirely done fighting you. We didn't even wait for the motorcade to reach the palace gates. The moment the supersonic jet's wheels hit the private royal tarmac, Logan had me in his arms, entirely ignoring protocol, the flight crew, and his own security detail. He carried me through the sweeping glass doors of our private pavilion and kicked the heavy, soundproof bedroom door shut with the heel of his boot. The room was bathed in the soft, golden light of the late afternoon, completely silent and perfectly isolated. He let my stilettos touch the heated floor, but he didn't let me go. His large, warm hands immediately went to the lapels of my oxblood blazer, slowly, reverently easing the lethal armor off my shoulders. I didn't try to help him. I couldn't. I was shaking. The moment the blazer hit the floor, a fractured, watery sob ripped itself from my throat. I slapped my hands over my face, completely horrified by my own vulnerability. I never cried. Crying was a loss of leverage. Crying was an admission of defeat in a boardroom full of sharks. But Logan didn't see weakness. He saw his queen. He let out a low, distressed rumble, a purely instinctual, territorial sound that vibrated deep in his massive chest. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me flush against him and burying my face in the crook of his neck. The heavy, grounding scent of crushed cedar and ozone completely enveloped me. Talk to me, little wolf, Logan murmured, his lips pressing into my hair as he gently rocked me against his solid frame. Tell me what hurts so I can destroy it. Nothing hurts, I gasped, my fingers knotting desperately into his crisp dress shirt. That's the problem. Logan, nothing hurts. For my entire life, I have been waiting for the catch. I pulled back just enough to look up at him, my vision blurred with tears, completely abandoning my fierce, calculated mask. I have spent 30 years fighting tooth and nail for every single scrap of respect I have, I confessed, the raw, heavy truth pouring out of me in a rush. I always believed that if I ever let a man take care of me, I would disappear. I thought love meant making myself smaller. I thought if I ever surrendered my independence, I would become a decorative object, a +1, a silent partner. Logan's golden eyes darkened with an ancient, profound sorrow. He reached up, his thumbs meticulously brushing the tears from my cheeks, treating me as though I were made of spun glass and steel simultaneously. I was so terrified of you, I whispered, my voice breaking, because you are the richest, most powerful predator on Earth. I thought you would erase me. Erase you? Logan breathed, the words carrying an agonizing weight, and he dropped to his knees right there on the plush carpet, repeating the devastating gesture of absolute submission he had shown me in the office. He wrapped his massive arms around my waist, pressing his face against my stomach. Sophie, you are a force of nature. Erasing you would be a crime against the universe." He looked up at me, his gaze blazing with a fierce, unwavering devotion that anchored my soul directly to his. "My wealth is not a cage, Sophie. It is a weapon," Logan vowed, his voice a low, echoing rumble of absolute truth. "And I only exist to place that weapon in your hands. I don't want to silence your roar. I want to amplify it so loudly that the entire world shakes when you speak. I worship your ambition. I am addicted to your fire." A profound, shattering relief crashed through my entire system. The war was officially over. I didn't have to choose between my global empire and the love of my life. They were the exact same thing. I dropped to my knees in front of him, my hands framing his impossibly handsome face. "I love you," I breathed, the words tasting like absolute freedom. "I love you so much it terrifies me." Logan let out a raw, desperate groan. He surged forward, crushing his mouth against mine. This kiss wasn't a playful battle of dominance or a public display of ownership. It was a soul-bearing collision. It was desperate, wet, and deeply emotional. He effortlessly swept me off the floor, carrying us both onto the massive, silk-draped bed. We moved together with frantic urgency, stripping away the remaining layers of expensive silk and tailored cotton until there was absolutely nothing between us but skin, heat, and raw, unrestrained devotion. Every touch was a promise, every gasp was an oath. He worshipped me with a terrifying, agonizingly slow intensity that stripped away every lingering doubt in my mind, replacing it with an overwhelming, blinding wave of absolute security. As I shattered in his arms, completely undone and calling out his name, Logan shifted his weight. He hovered over me, his massive chest heaving, his amber eyes completely blown wide with feral, fated mate instinct. He lowered his head, his sharp fangs grazing the highly sensitive pulse point at the juncture of my neck and shoulder. "Sophie," he rasped, his hot breath sending a jolt of liquid fire straight to my core. "Give me the final piece. Let me claim my king." "Let me claim my king," I whispered back, my voice trembling with a ferocious, entirely new kind of power. And the absolute shock in Logan's molten amber eyes was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. In the ancient, rigid traditions of our kind, the alpha always claimed his mate first. It was a demonstration of ownership, of physical dominance. But Logan didn't hesitate. The apex predator of the modern world, a man who could level economies with a single phone call, simply let out a shuddering breath and tilted his head back, exposing the thick, vulnerable column of his throat to me. He was offering me absolute dominion. "Take it," Logan groaned, his massive hands gripping my hips tightly, anchoring me to his blazing heat. "Everything I am, every ounce of my territory. Claim it, Sophie. Claim me." I didn't need to be told twice. I tangled my hands in his thick, dark hair, my heart hammering a frantic, triumphant rhythm against my ribs. I pressed my lips to the heavy, throbbing pulse point just beneath his jawline, breathing in the intoxicating, concentrated scent of crushed cedar and ozone. I let my fangs descend. With a fierce, unapologetic surge of possessiveness, I sank my teeth deep into the unbreakable skin of the Alpha King. A sound ripped from Logan's chest, a raw, earth-shattering roar of pure ecstasy that vibrated through the mattress, the floorboards, and straight into my marrow. The moment my blood mixed with his, an explosion of pure, golden energy detonated behind my eyes. I didn't just taste him. I felt the sheer, staggering weight of his entire empire rushing into my veins. I felt the ancient borders of his lands, the unshakable loyalty of his subjects, and above all, the blinding, all-consuming tsunami of his unconditional love for me. I pulled back, I gasping for air, my lips stained with the physical proof of our bond. The mark I left behind was a deep, perfect crescent, glowing faintly with a residual, magical heat. Logan's eyes were completely dilated, completely feral. He looked at me not just as a mate, but as his reigning deity. "My turn," he rasped, his voice dropping into an octave that commanded every cell in my body to submit. He moved with terrifying, fluid speed, flipping our positions so my back hit the silk sheets. His heavy frame blanketed me, a solid, immovable mountain of warmth. He didn't rush. He traced the line of my collarbone with his tongue, mapping the exact spot where his mark belonged, drawing out the anticipation until I was practically writhing beneath him, my fingers digging desperately into his broad shoulders. "Forever, my beautiful warlord," he promised against my skin. He bit down. The pain was a microscopic, brilliant flash, instantly drowned out by a tidal wave of paralyzing, euphoric pleasure. The bond locked into place with the resounding click of a heavy vault door sealing shut. Our souls fused together in a perfect, indestructible amalgamation of my fierce, calculated logic and his ancient, unrelenting power. A physical shockwave of energy blasted outward from our bodies, shattering the crystal lamps on the bedside tables and rattling the heavy, bulletproof glass of the pavilion windows. I cried out his name, my back arching off the mattress as the final missing piece of my universe slotted perfectly into place. For the first time in my 30 years of existence, the relentless, exhausting noise of my hyper-vigilant mind went completely, blissfully silent. I was safe. I was permanent. We collapsed into a tangle of sweat-slicked limbs, our breathing heavy and synchronized in the quiet, ruined luxury of the suite. Logan pulled my back flush against his chest, wrapping his heavy arms around me in an impenetrable cage of absolute devotion. He pressed a gentle, lingering kiss directly over the fresh, tender mark on my neck. I drifted into the deepest sleep of my life, completely unaware that the magical shockwave of our bonding had rippled out across the entire territory, waking every single member of the pack. They knew their king had been claimed, but more importantly, they knew exactly whose reign had just officially begun. When I finally opened my eyes, sunlight was streaming through the shattered windows, and Logan was standing at the foot of the bed holding a completely new, devastatingly sharp, tailored suit. "Good morning, my queen," he smirked, tossing a pristine white silk blouse onto the mattress. "Get dressed. You have a kingdom to restructure." I stepped into the Grand Council chamber, looking like a billionaire assassin. The custom suit Logan had selected for me was a masterpiece of slate gray wool, cut so sharply it could probably draw blood, paired with a pair of silver-heeled stilettos that echoed off the ancient stone floors like gunshots. But the most intimidating accessory I wore wasn't the tailoring. It was the dark, perfect claiming mark visible just above the collar of my silk blouse. The entire council of regional dukes and aristocratic pack elders had been waiting for over an hour. As the massive mahogany doors swung shut behind me, the room fell into a deathly, expectant silence. Logan walked exactly one step behind me. He didn't take his seat at the head of the massive, circular obsidian table. Instead, he pulled out the high-backed leather chair reserved for the sovereign, gesturing for me to sit, before crossing his massive arms and leaning casually against the stone wall right behind my shoulder. He looked like a lethally proud bodyguard. I didn't sit immediately. I remained standing, placing my hands flat on the polished obsidian, my eyes sweeping over the elite members of the court. I saw the expectation in their eyes. They were waiting for me to announce a new charitable foundation, or perhaps a reorganization of the royal gala schedule. They expected the decorative Luna. I tapped the discreet, high-tech watch Logan had gifted me the night before. Instantly, the center of the circular table illuminated. A massive, three-dimensional holographic projection sprang to life, displaying a highly detailed map of the kingdom's entire supply chain, complete with glowing real-time data feeds. tax brackets, and regional resource allocations. Several of the older dukes gasped, leaning back in their chairs as the complex logistical data rotated in the air before them. "Gentlemen," I began, my voice cool, authoritative, and projecting effortlessly across the cavernous room. "I have spent the last 12 hours reviewing the internal economic structure of this territory, and frankly, your distribution modeling is an absolute embarrassment." A shocked collective murmur rippled through the aristocrats. Lady Vivian, sitting near the front, actually leaned forward with a look of intense, predatory fascination. "You are currently taxing the lower-tier agricultural packs at a rate of 22% to subsidize the import of raw materials for the royal industrial sector," I continued, pacing slowly around the edge of the table, my heels clicking in a hypnotic rhythm. "It is archaic. It is mathematically inefficient. And as of this exact moment, it is entirely abolished." The Duke of the Western Steppes, a wealthy, entrenched traditionalist, sputtered indignantly. "Abolished? My queen, with all due respect, those tariffs fund the kingdom's central infrastructure. If we remove that tax bracket, we will bankrupt the royal reserves within a fiscal quarter." "We would," I agreed, a dangerous, razor-sharp smile curving my lips. I tapped my watch again. Then a new landmass appeared on the holographic projection, glowing in brilliant, undeniable gold. If we were still relying on outdated overland freight, but as of yesterday I am the sole proprietor of the Vanguard Archipelago. The entire room went dead silent. The Vanguard was a myth in their circles, a logistical superpower no royal pack had ever managed to penetrate. "I am rerouting 80% of the global maritime freight directly through our southern ports," I announced, the sheer thrill of total corporate domination surging through my veins. "The tariffs collected from international trade will not only replace the internal agricultural tax, but it will triple the royal treasury by Q3. The lower packs will keep entirely what they sow. The elite packs will manage the new deep-water docking logistics, and everyone's profit margins double. Everyone wins." I stopped pacing and locked eyes with the Duke of the Western Steppes. "Are there any objections to my decree?" The Duke stared at the glowing, impossible numbers hovering in the air. He looked at me, completely terrified and deeply in awe. Then he slowly stood up from his chair and bowed his head deeply. "None, my queen," he whispered reverently. "It is flawless." One by one, the rest of the council stood and bowed, a tidal wave of genuine, intellectual submission washing through the room. I hadn't just claimed their king. I had solved a century-old economic crisis in 5 minutes. I looked over my shoulder. Logan was practically vibrating. His amber eyes were entirely blown out with a mixture of immense pride and aggressive, feral arousal. He pushed off the stone wall, Ina completely ignoring the bowing council members, and wrapped his hand around my wrist. "The meeting is adjourned," Logan growled, his voice carrying a dark, unquestionable finality. Before I could even close the holographic projection, he was dragging me out the side exit of the council chamber and down a private, heavily guarded corridor. "Logan!" I laughed, struggling to keep up with his massive strides. I wasn't finished. I had an entirely separate PowerPoint prepared for the integration of localized healthcare logistics. "You can email it to them," Logan rumbled, throwing open a set of double doors that led directly onto a sun-drenched private balcony. A sleek silver helicopter was already waiting on the landing pad, the blades spinning up. "Because your reign is officially on a temporary hiatus. I packed your bags while you were sleeping." "You packed my bags?" I shouted over the deafening roar of the helicopter blades, practically breathless as Logan hauled me up into the plush leather interior of the cabin. "Logan, I just dismantled a century of tax law. I have to oversee the integration. I can't just leave for a vacation right now." "Watch me," Logan purred, strapping me into my seat before signaling the pilot. He leaned across the narrow cabin, completely unbothered by the sudden G-force, as we lifted aggressively into the sky. "You are not looking at another spreadsheet for at least a month, Sophie. The strike team I hired for you is already executing the Vanguard integration perfectly. Your only job right now is to let me spoil you absolutely rotten." I opened my mouth to argue, my fierce need for control flaring up, but he silenced me with a deep, earth-shattering kiss that completely derailed my train of thought. By the time he pulled back, I couldn't even remember what a supply chain was. What followed was a dizzying, fast-paced blur of absolute, ridiculous wealth and zero stress indulgence. We didn't just travel, we commanded the globe. The first stop was a private, submerged glass restaurant in the Maldives, where we ate caviar, which I no longer cared about the price of, while glowing manta rays swam directly over our heads. Logan had rented the entire atoll, meaning the only sound for miles was the gentle lap of the ocean and his low, constant murmurs of devotion. From there, we took the supersonic jet to Paris. We didn't stay in a penthouse. Logan had purchased a historic, an 18th century chateau on the outskirts of the city, just so we could have complete privacy while we drank impossibly old wine and did terribly wicked things to each other on priceless antique furniture. My wardrobe continued to magically replenish itself, shifting from lethal power suits to breathtaking, custom-tailored resort wear that made me feel like an off-duty goddess. He anticipated every need, every whim, every fleeting desire before I even realized I had them. He was relentless in his campaign to strip away the remaining exhaustion of my past life. If I even looked mildly fatigued, he would draw a bath infused with rare, soothing oils and wash my hair himself. If I stared too long at a painting in a private gallery, it was securely packaged and loaded onto our jet within the hour. By the third week, we were lounging on the sun-drenched deck of a massive, aggressively modern super yacht anchored off the Amalfi Coast. I was wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and a sheer emerald cover-up, casually sipping a perfectly chilled cocktail while reading a completely frivolous novel. I set the book down and looked over the railing at the glittering azure water. I took a deep breath. I was completely, fundamentally at peace. The constant gnawing anxiety that I needed to outwork everyone in the room just to survive was entirely gone. I was safe. I was fiercely loved. And my empire was running flawlessly in my absence. Logan walked out onto the teak deck, wearing nothing but a pair of dark swim trunks, the sunlight catching the rigid, heavily scarred muscles of his chest. He carried a silver tray holding a small velvet box and 2 fresh drinks. He set the tray down on the glass table next to my lounger and sat heavily beside me, his warmth radiating like a furnace. He reached out, his thumb lazily tracing the claiming mark on my neck, a gesture that still sent a rush of golden heat straight to my core. "You look bored, my queen," Logan teased gently, his amber eyes completely relaxed and full of adoration. "Should I buy Italy just to give you something to restructure?" "Don't you dare," I laughed, leaning into his touch. "I think I might actually be getting the hang of this whole unlimited relaxation concept. It's dangerously addictive." "Good," he murmured softly. The playful amusement faded from his expression, replaced by a sudden, intense seriousness that made my heart skip a beat. He reached for the small velvet box on the silver tray. Because as much as I love watching you relax, Sophie," Logan said, his voice dropping into that heavy, commanding octave that always made my breath hitch. He clicked the velvet box open, revealing something that made the surrounding billionaire luxury pale in comparison. "I think it's time you knew exactly what happened to my kingdom the moment your fangs pierced my skin." I stared down into the small velvet box, my fiercely analytical brain struggling to process what I was looking at. Resting on a bed of black satin wasn't a diamond engagement ring or a traditional wedding band. It was a massive, ancient signet ring forged from heavy, solid gold. I recognized the royal crest instantly, a snarling, highly detailed wolf that had represented Logan's bloodline for centuries. But the crest had been altered. Wrapped completely around the wolf, sheltering it in a flawless, intricate cage of sharp geometric lines, was a modern compass rose. It was my corporate logo. Logan, I breathed, my eyes darting from the heavy gold ring to his intense golden gaze. You had your ancestral family crest redesigned to include my company logo? The traditionalist elders on the council are going to have an absolute aneurysm. I didn't have it redesigned, Sophie, Logan rumbled, his voice dropping into a register of profound, ancient awe. He reached out, gently plucking the heavy ring from the velvet. That is the original 10,000-year-old sovereign signet. It sits in a climate-controlled, magically sealed vault in the center of the Winter Palace. Only the reigning Alpha King can wear it. I frowned, my logistical mind trying to find the missing variable. Then how did my corporate compass get on it? The moment your fangs pierced my throat, Logan whispered, leaning in so close the scent of crushed cedar completely enveloped me. The ancestral magic of the territory didn't just accept you as a Luna. It felt your mind. It felt your absolute, terrifying dominance. The entire royal vault physically shuddered. The pack sentinels watched this ring melt inside its reinforced glass display and completely reforge itself. My jaw dropped. The sheer, staggering weight of what he was telling me hit my system like a freight train. "Are you telling me?" I started, my voice trembling slightly between shock and deep, profound amusement. "That my fated mate bond initiated a hostile metaphysical takeover of your sovereign state? I accidentally rebranded a monarchy?" "You didn't rebrand it, my beautiful warlord." Logan laughed, a deep, booming sound that echoed over the azure water of the Amalfi coast. "You optimized it. The pack magic recognized that my raw power is nothing without your brilliant direction. You didn't just claim a husband, Sophie. You claimed the entire kingdom as your equal asset." He took my left hand, his massive, warm fingers dwarfing mine, and slowly slid the heavy gold signet onto my index finger. The metal was strangely warm. The moment it slid over my knuckle, it automatically shrank, seamlessly resizing itself until it gripped my finger in a flawless, indestructible fit. A gentle hum of golden energy pulsed up my arm, anchoring me completely to the earth, to the pack, and to the towering, a devastatingly handsome predator sitting beside me. I leaned back against my plush lounger, holding my hand up to the Mediterranean sun. The gold caught the light, fiercely unapologetic, and completely permanent. I had spent my entire life terrified that loving a powerful man would cost me my independence. Instead, loving the Alpha King had literally rewritten the laws of nature to ensure I bowed to no one. A sharp, efficient chime cut through the romantic silence. My sleek, encrypted tablet, resting on the glass table next to my cocktail, lit up with a high-priority notification from my elite strike team. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the tablet, my eyes scanning the heavily redacted international shipping brief. "The European Transit Union is trying to stall the Vanguard Archipelago integration," I muttered, my corporate instincts flaring to life in a millisecond. "They want a 3% margin increase on the northern docks." Logan didn't sigh. He didn't complain that I was working on our endless honeymoon. Instead, his amber eyes dilated completely, a dark, feral flush of heat rising in his throat as he watched me effortlessly switch from a pampered goddess back into a ruthless CEO. "What is your executive order, my queen?" Logan purred, shifting his massive frame closer, his hot breath brushing my shoulder. My fingers flew across the digital keyboard. "Buy out their parent company at a 10% deficit and liquidate their board of directors by lunch," I said firmly, hitting send. "God, you are spectacular," Logan groaned, a raw, territorial sound vibrating deep in his chest. Before I could even set the tablet down, he snatched it from my hands and tossed it blindly onto a nearby pile of plush towels. He surged forward, his heavy, scarred chest pressing me back into the cushions of the lounger. His mouth crashed down on mine, hot, demanding, and utterly consuming, instantly obliterating any remaining thoughts of global supply chains. I tangled my hands in his thick, dark hair, the heavy gold of the sovereign signet ring pressing cool against his scalp. I kissed him back with every ounce of the blazing, undeniable fire that he spent every single day feeding. We were a flawless collision of power, an unstoppable force permanently bonded to an immovable object. I am never letting you pay for another meal as long as you live. Logan breathed heavily against my lips, his large hands mapping the curves of my waist with agonizing reverence. I smiled, a fierce, razor-sharp curve of absolute contentment, and pulled my king back down to me. I know, I whispered against his mouth. Because I already own the restaurant.